You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Paul Brophy. I'm flying solo this evening. My colleague Roisin Cllr can't join us, but we are joined tonight by Councillor Frank McBearty Jr., who is an independent councillor representing the Lifford Stranorlar local electoral area on Donegal County Council, and he's been an elected member of Donegal County Council since 2009. A former mayor of Donegal from 2012 to 2013, Councillor McBearty is known nationally as a result of the Morris tribunal ruling that members of An Garda Síochána had tried to frame him and his father, Frank McBearty Sr., in 1996 for the murder of Richie Byrne. Councillor McBearty pursued the Irish state in a long running legal battle to restore his good name, and in 2005 he settled all his claims against the Irish state. Councillor McBearty, like thousands of homeowners in Donegal, has been affected by the defective block scandal. And in May 2025, Councillor McBearty had a motion passed on Donegal County Council seeking an independent judicial statutory inquiry into the affected stresses. So, Councillor Frank McBearty Jr., you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Well, thank you, Paul, for inviting me on to talk about local government and about the defective concrete scandal, which is
Yeah.
known nationally as the MICA scandal, and that is an incorrect perception, especially when MICA is not the cause of the structural defects in Donegal properties. But I mean, your colleague is Russian as well, talked to her there earlier, and just like to thank you for inviting me on.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned there, Frank, it is known kind of nationally as the MICA scandal, but there's a lot more to it than just MICA.
Well, it's very simple, and the way I'll start off by explaining it, forensic evidence always supersedes circumstantial evidence in any type of investigation or any type of case. So you basically, we now today, and in particular my parents' home, my mother and father's house, we have used it as a guinea pig. We have tested my father's blocks and foundations for everything forensically. And what we discovered in 2021 from the sulfate attack analysis conducted on my father's blocks, and then in 2023, the testing forensically of the foundations, is that mica is not the cause of the structural defects in Donegal properties as promoted by Donegal County Council, the NSAI, and our government. It would be easy for the government if it was a mica issue, because MICA can't do what they said it originally did, and it's very, very complicated when especially for homeowners who don't understand exactly what exactly is wrong with their homes, and this all brings into the question mark what engineers were advising people, going back 14, 15 years ago when people started seeing visual cracks and swelling in their walls and their outside walls in particular, but it's an issue that warrants a public inquiry because it's the biggest scandal since the Garda corruption scandal in Donegal, and it's even bigger than that scandal because there's other parts of Ireland that are affected, but Donegal is unique because Donegal has been restricted to testing for mica only in the old scheme, and we now have discovered through forensic evidence and through scientific testing that mica was never the cause of the structural defects in Donegal properties.
And as there is a redress scheme there in place, put in place by the government, do you believe this redress scheme is flawed?
Well, you have to go back to the first scheme, which was the 1910 scheme, and you have to look at the far bigger picture here. The Irish government in 2018 published through the NSAI, they instructed the NSAI to begin the process of developing a defective concrete block standard for Ireland. But they did do that. They published IS 465, which is the standard for defective concrete blocks in Ireland. But when Donegal homeowners started testing for the enhanced scheme that was established in 2020, actually in February 2020, which opened in June 2020, the Donegal properties and homeowners of those properties were restricted to testing for MICA only. But at that time, none of us really knew the ins and outs of what was actually the real cause of the structural defects until Petrolab in the UK started testing on behalf of engineers who were sending core samples over to them because the Irish laboratories were so busy testing properties in Donegal and County Mayo that engineers then started using the UK Petrolab. And it's when the UK Petrolab test results came back with the test suite A and the test suite B, they showed every single person property that they had tested. They gave them a visual estimate of what actually is the true cause of the structural defects. So the true cause of the structural defects were identified visually in the test suite B, which meant that reactive iron sulfide minerals above 0.1% were showing up visually between 1 and 2% in the test suite B test results. So what that meant is engineers should have been automatically advising their clients to do what's called a sulfide attack analysis on their core samples, but they weren't advising the clients to test under a sulfide attack analysis because the sulfide attack analysis quantifies the exact percentage of the reactive minerals that shouldn't be in the aggregates that were used to manufacture the concrete products, such as the concrete blocks and the ready-mix concrete. But my father, he went one step further. We tested my father's foundations, which are also defective, with high levels of reactive iron sulfide minerals. Now, you have to understand, you have standards. You have a standard for a concrete block, and you have a standard for ready-mix concrete for foundations. And those standards are adopted by the NSAI from the EU directives that come in when they enhance the standards every so often. So your standard for a concrete block, for example, is EN 771-3. And what goes in front of that is IS for Irish standard and BS for British standard. So the British standards automatically adopt the EU directive, and the Irish standards automatically adopt the EU directives. Now, the big question mark why a public inquiry must be established is why did the government not use the EU directives, which are adopted as Irish and British standards, to test the concrete blocks in Donegal? And the reason, and this is my opinion, and the reason why they didn't do that is because it would mean that every single property that is identified reactive iron sulfide minerals above 0.1% would mean that would mean full demolition, including the foundations, if the foundations were tested. And if they were tested showing up high levels of reactive minerals, that means you would have to take out the foundations as well. But what they done was they allowed us to test for MICA only in Donegal when MICA is not a reactive mineral, and it cannot do what they said it does. And the evidence is contained in the Petrolab test results and from other people who have got involved in this scandal to date, such as scientists like Andreas Lehmann from Switzerland, the Canadian experts, the Norwegian experts, experts in Connecticut and Massachusetts. It's a phenomenon in Donegal that MICA has been labelled as the cause of the structural defects when it's not. If my house and my father's house only had MICA, I wouldn't have a problem. My house wouldn't be crumbling, and my father's house wouldn't be crumbling like thousands of other properties in Donegal. Now, we have estimated that there's over 50,000 properties in Donegal that will eventually have to be demolished. But the problem is, only yesterday at the full council meeting, the council has now admitted that they have over 2,000 properties on their social housing books that are affected, and it's
Right.
And this problem is going to escalate because the enhanced scheme that has replaced the 90-10 scheme is basically going to stop people from getting their house forensically tested. And as I said at the very beginning here, forensic evidence always supersedes circumstantial evidence. Now, I've written a position paper on this after a 4-year extensive investigation into Donegal County Council, the NSAI, and what the government have actually done in this. And the political element of this must be investigated by a public inquiry, because that is the only way the full truth will come around why this defective concrete block standard was designed and created by the state when they already have the standards in place for concrete blocks and ready-mix concrete. And that is the only standards that you should be using to test the products that you purchased onto the open market, that have been allowed to be sold in the open market with high levels of reactive iron sulfate minerals that are not allowed in the aggregates used for concrete products today, or back when this scandal originally started. And we don't even know. There's houses that have been tested in Donegal, come back to the 1980s, that are showing high levels of reactive minerals.
And Frank,
it all stems from the fact that the government in 2001 allowed the industries such as the concrete industry, quarry industry, and the construction industry to self-regulate. The industry was regulated up until 2001, and the vast majority of properties in Donegal are all from around 2000 right up to 2020. So there's been no policing of the industry. There has been no market surveillance and building control. Donegal County Council has no record of building control and market surveillance since 2001. And the biggest issue here is no one has been made accountable for this scandal to date.
My God. And Pete, you said your home is affected, your father's home is affected. Like, that must be really, really distressing for a lot of the people that you represent, that their homes are basically, excuse me, they're crumbling, right before their eyes.
But we've had a TD in Donegal which have become pretty close to, that got elected on this basis, and like Charles Ward represents the 100% redress party, and we have 4 councillors as well that represent them in Donegal County Council. And I think they're only just starting to see how bad this scandal actually is, because you can't get answers from Donegal County Council. It's like a closed shop. It's basically like Groundhog Day when I was fighting Garda corruption. The silence is deafening. When you ask a question, and a serious question, you're not getting answers to those questions, which I'm entitled to as an elected member of Donegal County Council. Like, I have investigated so much of this aspect, it would take too long to discuss it, and it would be too complicated for your viewers to actually understand it.
And as regards within the redress scheme, there are people who are currently, like, they're rebuilding their homes. What is the level of support like? Because I've seen
It's
stuff.
absolutely scandalous. It's disgraceful the way that homeowners have been treated. First of all, right, I'll give an example. My house is one of the bigger houses, and my father's is one of the bigger houses. The scheme is no good to us. Like 468,000, which is now the limit, plus you get 38,000 from the SEAI grant. So basically, it's just over $500,000. But my house would cost 1.5 million to rebuild. Like, I've invested nearly 900,000 euro of my own money in my home, which will more likely have to be fully demolished when I get it fully tested. I haven't fully tested my house as yet because of the statute of limitations that could be there. So once you test, the statute of limitation clock starts clicking. Because I'm going to go the same route as my father is going, which is the High Court route against the Irish state. So my father's house is the same. It cost over 1.5 million to rebuild, and all he would get is $500,000 from the scheme. But the scheme is not what people thinks it is, because the average house, say you're rebuilding a house of 2,500 square feet, that house of 2,500 square feet with the grant, you're going to have to find anything between 75,000 and 150,000 to rebuild that house on top of what you get from the grants. And you see, this is not a redress scheme. This is only a grant scheme.
Building costs have been going
through the roof. Like, the average at the minute now across Donegal is about €250 per square foot. So I mean, if you're rebuilding a house that's 2,500 square feet, you're talking close to 600,000 or 700,000 to rebuild that house.
That's
But you see, the thing about it, the homeowners didn't cause this. This is the failure of the Irish state to police the industry that caused this. And the industry has not been held to account. And in my opinion, the only way that the full truth of how this happened, and it can still happen because the industry still has not gone back to being a regulated industry, it's still an unregulated industry. The bottom line is that the Irish state are solely responsible for allowing this to happen. And the only way that we'll ever get the full truth out is in a full judicial, independent public inquiry.
And you had a motion passed on Donegal County Council back in May, I think, of this year, and it got
No, actually, when
it got
last year,
unanimous support.
it was actually the first motion I put down for this new term of the council, asking the government to establish a public inquiry within the first 100 days of that government, which has been just deaf ears has been on it. But the problem you've got in politics today is that all the political parties are basically, they're so close. There's no, in my opinion, there's no difference in any political party, and it's especially in local government. There is no difference. When you look at national politics, which is completely different to the person, to the ordinary Joe Soap looking at national politics, and then you look at the local politics, and all you see is you see political parties sharing power sharing and local government, sharing out the expenses, sharing out the committees that give you those expenses, and it's about basically clapping each other in the back and blowing kisses across the chamber at each other, when proper debate and proper issues should be raised. They're, in my opinion, they're too scared to offend the executive, who actually run the local authorities, and that needs to change in local government if we're going to have proper accountability in local government.
And you've been a county councillor since 2009. You were elected as a Labour Party councillor in 2009, and you contested a by-election in 2010 and a general election in 2011 in Donegal Southwest. But you left the party in 2000
2013.
and in 2013, and you were re-elected as an independent.
Well, I have no history of being in politics, and my father has no history of being in politics. Now, my grandfather would have been, like many grandfathers and grandmothers. My grandfather was a Fianna Fáil supporter, and then he became a Blaney supporter when Blaney left Fianna Fáil back in the day. But I don't even remember that because I'm too young. I'm only 56, and I lived in Scotland and England for 10 years, and my father also emigrated for 20 years. He lived in Scotland. When he came back from the Congo in 1962, he emigrated to Scotland. So what do you call it? My father was a contractor in Scotland and came back to Rafo with his four sons, we were all born in Scotland. I was 7 when I came back from Ireland, or came back from Scotland to Rafo, and my father bought a pub in his town where he's from, and he built one of the most successful and well-known nightclubs in the whole of Ireland, which ended up the biggest country and western venue actually in Ireland. We've had every band, every live band that you can name has played in my father's premises. The biggest DJs in the world have played in the discos and what people would have known back in the day, raves, and which is now known as dance music. So what do you call it? Like my background is not politics, and basically I became so high profile after or during the campaign to clear names for a murder that didn't even happen in Donegal. And the fact that I represented myself at the Morris Tribunal for over 3 years, my profile went through the roof. Like nobody knew who I was before I was wrongfully arrested for a crime I didn't commit. So basically, that put me out in a place where I probably didn't want to be. But the Labour Party hadn't a candidate for the 2009 local elections because the candidate they had picked had been promoted in Donegal County Council, and he couldn't run in the local elections because of that. So 4 weeks before the local elections, the Labour Party through Brendan Howland, Joe Costello, approached me through another third party of an ex principal in Ballybofey, St Columba's in Ballybofey, St Columba's School in Ballybofey, Michael O'Boyle, may rest in peace, he's dead now. He sadly passed away there a couple of years ago. He was my first director of elections. They asked me would I run, and I said to my father, I says, what do you think? And I says, I don't know anything with politics. And my father says, sure, run. If you get elected, you get elected. And if you don't, you don't. So what do you call it? I think it shocked the whole nation because I was the only councillor in the whole country that was actually interviewed that night after the elections on RTE because it was such a big story, me getting elected. And I got a huge first-time vote of 1,500 first preference votes, which was a very big vote locally. So I think I shocked everybody, and I've been re-elected ever since. In every local election that I've ran in, I've been re-elected.
Yeah, that's a
But I've put in a huge amount of work
achievement.
on the ground, and the hours I've put in huge hours. I've ran in the, as you already know, you've mentioned it. I've ran in the by-election. I ran in the general election after the by-election. I think it's 2014 general election as well. But I was a young, naive politician at the time. And I feel that people within the Labour Party that were advising me at the time didn't advise me correctly. And I've made mistakes as that young politician when I was running for national politics. But what do you call it? That's history now. So what do you call it? I'm happy enough the way I am in local government. I'm nearly 17 years representing the people of Donegal, and in particular East Donegal, where I'm from, which is known in the council as the Lifford Stranorlar Municipal District. It used to be known as the Stranorlar Electoral Area, but when they brought in the municipalities, it all changed to municipal districts.
Yeah, and
I had the great honour of being mayor of the county.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. You were mayor in
mayor of the
2012
county.
to
You're the first citizen for a year.
What were the highlights of that year?
Well, Donegal won All Ireland. That was
basically that's a pretty good highlight.
So what they called that. I had to do quite a lot of events due to that. So I had really, really busy years as mayor of the county, and I think the way that I did the job speaks for itself. I've been complimented by many aspects of the media, the way I conducted myself as mayor. I did everything professionally, what he called. I would say a lot of the people out there that don't like me didn't want me to succeed in that position, but I feel that I did a very good job for the people of Donegal that year.
And obviously we've spoken about the defective concrete blocks, which is an absolutely massive issue, not just in Donegal, but it's a huge national issue as well. What would be the other?
I don't class myself as a politician. I'm Frank McBrearty. I don't look at politics the way that established politicians look at politics. You hear this as, oh, he's a left politician, he's a right politician, he's centre left, he's centre right, he's the middle of the road. I'm none of them. When somebody comes to me, if I can help them, I will help them. If I can't help them, I will tell them that I can't help them. But at the same time, I will still try and help them if there's any light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm not that type of politician that classes himself as left or right or whatever you want to call it. I think that that's what's wrong with politics. And the thing about it is there should be no issue too big that a politician who's elected to represent people. Sadly, local government has been diluted by government and diluted by civil servants. I can't do the same things now as a local public representative as I was able to do in the first 5 years I was elected to Donegal County Council. I mean, the likes of medical cards, the likes of cares allowance, the likes of all that type of issue. I don't have the direct contacts with the departments anymore because we're not allowed to speak to them. They'll only speak to a TD or a senator. But thankfully, I've got Charles Ward and I've got a few senators that would raise issues for me like that there. And I can always pass. If I'm not able to resolve an issue, I can pass on the person to the likes of Charles Ward, who's our new TD in Donegal, and to other senators that I would work with in Stranorlar.
Yeah, and we'll get to the local government in it again in a little bit more detail. But as we said, we mentioned the effective blocks. It's an absolutely massive issue. What would be the other big issues that will be coming up in your electoral area?
Well, it's the usual. You've problems with roads. You've problems with Irish water. You've not enough infrastructure. There's not enough money being spent on upgrading the water pipes that we have. Sewage in towns and villages need to be upgraded. The TII project here in Donegal, which I personally can't see the government funding €1 billion project. It's been ongoing now for the last 6 or 7 years, the design stage of it. These are the type of issues that need to be dealt with. Like Irish water, in my opinion, has been a complete disaster. The local, I depend on the Donegal County Council staff member who deals with the water in my area. Without that Donegal staff member, I wouldn't get half the work done. So when somebody has a bust pipe and their water goes off, I can contact the member of staff in question on the ground that goes out and fixes that burst pipe. But when this all becomes completely privatized, we won't have the access to that council staff member, because Donegal County Council are really only a subcontractor now to Irish Water. So that's just one example. And I can see it going the same way with the local roads. When I need a pothole fixed, or if I need a road addressed, I'm going to have to I can contact my overseer or my foreman in this area, and once it's on the schedule, you know that issue will be dealt with. But if that gets subbed out the same way Irish Water has been taken away from us, we're going to be left that we're not going to be able to contact the subcontractor only in working hours. See, I can contact the council staff at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night when there's an issue with water. And the reality is that the way things are going, we're going to lose all that.
Yeah, for Roisin and I, we've spoken to a lot of county councillors over the last number of months, and Irish water just keeps coming up. And
I don't even go to the meetings with Irish Water. It's a waste of time. It's an absolute joke.
And from what we found out as well, yes, we have big housing issues, and it's more than issues, it's crisis. But there's also water crisis. Like there's many rural villages, as you mentioned.
We have another issue in Donegal.
You won't be able to build a house until there's proper treatment plant in place.
Well, one of the big issues we have in Donegal is we have a huge social housing problem. We need thousands, and I mean thousands, of social homes to be built in Donegal. The Donegal County Council is building quite a lot of social homes at the minute. But the problem we've got, and it's a bigger problem, is the private sector are not building in Donegal because of the cost of building a private sector dwelling and putting it on the market. They can't put it on the market because they can't sell it for what it's costing to build. And that is an issue that our government and politicians at national level need to address, because counties like Donegal are not building private properties, and the young people can't get mortgages to buy these properties if a property developer does come into Donegal and build in Donegal. That is a huge issue going forward. I told you it's €250 per square foot on an average to build a property now, and if it costs 250,000 to build, say, a 3 or 4 bedroom detached house, you can't sell it for that in certain parts of Donegal. So the contractors and developers are not building unless they're guaranteed. If they've got lots of land, they'll build on it, but they're looking for the council to buy those properties as social housing, because they know that they'll get the money from government through Donegal County Council. But that doesn't deal with the issue of the young couple is wanting to get married, have children. They can't actually afford to buy a home now in Donegal because the contractors are not building them for a start because they're costing too much to build. And the way it has left people, like, banks are not borrowing the way they were back during the Celtic Tiger.
Oh,
And
certainly not.
like, it's the whole thing needs to be looked at, and there hasn't been a quick enough response or an urgent enough response by our government to deal with issues that Donegal and other rural counties have, like Donegal.
And would you say that the whole defective block crisis is having an impact on as well on the building
But
of
it's going to be
home
another
in
10 years.
Donegal?
It's going to be another 10 years before the defective concrete scandal really is fully understood. Because what people don't realise, right, the government, Donegal County Council, and the NSAI originally blamed MICA for the cause of this because they designed an original scheme for outer leaf remediation only, which means that they would take out outer leaf blocks. Well, the facts are that the properties in Donegal are affected by reactive iron sulfate minerals. And there is three categories of reactive iron sulfate minerals that are causing the structural defects in Donegal. And it's very easy to explain, but this is what engineers are not explaining. And I'm going to explain it in a lay term.
Please do.
The category one, this is what I call it. Category one is pyrrhotite. And pyrrhotite, the permitted level in aggregate of pyrrhotite is 0.1%. Then you have a second category, which is reactive pyrite. Reactive pyrite is 0.9%. And then you have a third category, you have rare pyrite, minor pyrite, chalcopyrite, marcasite, and others in that third category, and that is 0.99%. But when you have those two categories present with pyrrhotite, the test result that you do under a sulfate attack analysis is reclassified as a total sulfates. So those other two permitted levels of 0.9% and 0.99%, they drop to 0.1% as well. So you have a combination of three different types of categories of reactive minerals that are causing the structural defects. But the big question mark here is you also have high levels of mica in this aggregate as well, identified in the test results. But the big factor is in the standards, mica is not quoted. Mica is not in the standard for a concrete block or a ready mix concrete that is used in a foundation. So you have to ask the question why the government went out and invented the fact that mica was the cause of the structural defects when we know scientifically today, and it's not me saying this, this is the world leading experts are saying this. And the test results that we have in our possession, which has been supplied to Donegal County Council, supplied to the ministers, supplied to the government, supplied to the NSAI, that mica is not the cause of the structural defects. And to date, they still haven't admitted publicly that they know that mica is not the cause of the structural defects. And the bottom line is that the defects in my home and every other property in Donegal is being caused by what's called total sulfates, above 0.1% in the concrete blocks and in the ready mix concrete that is used for the foundations. See, the difference between a concrete block, the Newton strength on a concrete block is 7.5 Newton. In a ready mix concrete foundation, it's 35 Newton and above. So it takes longer for the degradation to happen in the foundation because the Newton strength is stronger. But it's quicker in the concrete block because the Newton strength is not as strong as the foundation. And the phenomenon that you're actually seeing in the Donegal properties, the cracking and the swelling and the eventual crumbling of the concrete block is caused by reactive minerals, not mica. If mica was the only problem, your block would never disintegrate the way our blocks are disintegrating. It's because of internal sulfate attack. See, your aggregate, the strength of an aggregate is the iron oxide inside the aggregate. And that iron oxide, when there's high levels of reactive minerals in the aggregate, it attacks the iron oxide, causing the iron oxide to rust. And at the same time, it attacks the Newton strength of the concrete block and it causes the cement paste, which is the Newton strength of the concrete block, to disintegrate into dust. But it happens over a period of 1 to maybe 30 years. And scientifically, they don't even know how long these concrete blocks will actually last. But what happens is, during the manufacturing process, there's a chemical reaction that causes the aggregate to produce sulfuric acid. And that sulfuric acid then turns into internal sulfate attack. And that internal sulfate attack is caused by the reactive iron sulfate minerals above the 0.1% that is permitted in the actual standard for that concrete block, which is EN-IS-BS 771-3. And then in the concrete foundation, it's EN-IS-BS 206. And this is what engineers did not explain 14 years ago, that when somebody came to their house with structural defects, that engineer should have been advising that client, we need to test your house forensically for everything, especially under the standard that the concrete block was manufactured under and the ready-mix concrete. Like, there's very few houses in Donegal that actually have a test result on their foundations. My father's is the first house in the island of Ireland that actually has the full set of forensic test results on the blocks and the foundations.
And Frank, between between houses and local authority houses and other properties, how many buildings, properties do you think are affected by this whole defective block um, scandal across Donegal?
Well, our estimates are that we think there's over 50,000 properties affected. And we have done a huge amount of investigating into this. And we have talked to sources within the concrete industry. We've talked to sources within the quarry industry. From my investigations over a 4-year period, we estimate that there's well over 50,000 affected properties, commercial properties, private residents, social housing. The council's just admitted yesterday that they believe that they have over 2,000 properties affected by it.
And
I mean, that's only social housing. And the
yeah,
government like people in Dublin to think that it's only 6,000 or 7,000 properties in Donegal that are affected. But the problem is, the government have established a scheme that is basically designed for outer leaf remediation. If you go on a scientific test result and an engineer has that scientific test result, that engineer has only one option, and that option is to recommend full demolition based on a full set of forensic test results. It's a bit like a Garda criminal investigation. It's like the Richie Barnes case. No forensics done, no proper post-mortem by the state pathologist. But what cleared my name down the road was the fact that Dr. John Harbison exhumed Richie Barnes's body in July 2001, sent away body parts, and in particular his skull, to Sheffield University to a Dr. Philip Lunn, who was the world leading expert in reconstruction of bone material, and Professor Helen Whitwell of the British Home Office, who was also a lecturer in Sheffield University. They reconstructed Richie Barnes' skull, and they discovered that the force of impact, human intervention is the words that she used at the Morris Tribunal, could not have caused the injury that led to other injuries. The force of impact was so great, but it was forensic evidence conducted by them that proved that I didn't murder anybody. So it's the same scenario in the concrete block. Forensic evidence always supersedes circumstantial evidence, and the MICA theory, the MICA freeze thaw theory, is all based on circumstantial evidence to get Donegal County Council and the state and the other people that are involved in the scandal out of the hole that they have dug for themselves. Because it's a bit like the Garda corruption case. When we started investigating and proving what was done to us, and Garda Síochána kept digging the hole deeper for themselves until the public inquiry was established and until all our High Court cases were eventually settled in the courts because of the evidence that we had gathered up to prove that they tried to frame us for a crime we didn't commit. Well, it's the exact same scenario. It's an Irish solution to an Irish problem. That's how the government deals with scandals in Ireland. They only want to tell the story how the government wants to tell the story. They don't want to tell the story how the victims and how the people who are affected by those scandals want to tell the story. And that story needs to be the truth and nothing but the truth. And the thing about it is, the problem that the state have is that I have been so well educated over the last 30 years dealing with state corruption that I'm an Irish expert in investigating corruption. And I mean, systemic corruption is one of the words that Frederick Morris, the chairman of the Morris Tribunal, used in one of his reports. The systemic corruption that is in politics in Ireland is, I don't even think the public realise how systemically corrupt politics actually is in Ireland. And politics is to blame for the defective concrete scandal, the same as every other scandal in this country. I mean, you just take a look over the last 30 years, how many public inquiries into corruption in this country has been established. You've had the Smithwick's Tribunal, you've had the Moriarty Tribunal, you've had the Flood and Mahon Tribunals, you've had the Morris Tribunal, you've had the Bar Tribunal, which was the shooting dead of John Carthy. It's a never-ending story. You have the Charton Tribunal, which was the allegations made by Maurice McCabe, a Garda sergeant. I mean, it's a never-ending story when it comes to corruption in the Irish Free State.
And if local government, as you said earlier on, you said it's very different to what it was when you started first. You were able to pick up the phone to the local person, and you were able to get something done. Between the over centralization of power and all the other issues that exist.
The presidential election is a good example of the way politics has gone in Ireland. Like, we talk about democracy in Ireland, especially in the 26 counties. We constantly talk about democracy. There's no democracy in the presidential election. If I want to run for the presidential election in the morning, which I don't want to do, right? Because I'm already in one political hellhole in local government, and in my opinion, the presidency is a retirement home for politicians who's come to the end of their days, or people who want to be politicians. But the presidential election is not a democratic election. But the reality is, you have to know the law to be able to beat the law. So yes. The Constitution clearly states that if you want to put your name forward as a presidential election candidate, you have to have the support of 4 local authorities or 20 Oireachtas members. Now, how can that be constitutional, even though it is constitutional and it's written in the Constitution? If it should be like every other election in Ireland, if you're an Irish citizen, you should be able to run for local government, which you can do. You should be able to run for national government, which you can do. And it should be the same in the presidential election. We have basically 3 candidates running in the presidential election now today that are basically affiliated to political parties. I can't say that about Catherine Connolly because she is an independent. But the way Sinn Féin have actually won, and in my opinion, Sinn Féin are going to damage Catherine Connolly, because they have put their hat on Catherine Connolly as they're supporting Catherine Connolly. I think Catherine Connolly would have been a stronger candidate on her own, but the other 2 candidates are what do you call it? Civil war politics candidates. You have Heather Humphreys and you have Jim Gavin, who's a former Irish soldier, an ex-JA manager of Dublin. He's a celebrity. I would describe him as a celebrity candidate who has a political background. He's, as far as I'm aware, you can correct me if I'm right or wrong on this, he's a former civil servant too. Is that correct?
He was CEO, Chief Operating Officer of the Irish Aviation Authority.
Yeah, well, and what do you call it? Like, my father was a soldier, so I have great admiration for Irish soldiers, because my father was in the Congo in 1961 in the 36th Battalion, and what them Irish soldiers went through was absolutely crazy. They weren't even equipped properly to go out to the Congo. They were very well trained, but they weren't very well equipped. But anyway, that's another day's story, the Congo. But this election is a farce. It's what do you call it? I don't think there'll be that many people who vote on it, but people should come out and vote on it. But they
You think
shouldn't
many
vote.
people will spoil their vote?
Well, I think I'm not supporting anybody, but I'll be voting for Catherine Connolly because there's nobody else to vote for, in my opinion. Because I certainly won't be voting for Fianna Fáil candidate or a Fine Gael candidate.
Yeah, and as I said, you've had a very varied career in local government, and you said you spent over 30 years, examining the law in depth, and the level of research that you have done on this whole defective blocks scandal in Donegal is uh, absolutely
My senior counsel, Martin Giblin, recently passed away. And Martin Giblin was a great man. He taught me everything I know about the law. But like Martin Giblin's famous quote to me all the time, you've got to beat the law, you've got to use the law to beat the law. And he says, you're a fool for a lawyer if you represent yourself. I mean, I've taken those quotes right through my political career. And the education, I'm the only person on the island of Ireland that has had the education of 30 years in the Irish courts, tribunal of inquiry, and now nearly 17 years in local government. There is no one in Ireland has been educated the way that I have been concerning the issues of corruption and what causes corruption. And like I've even beat the AIB Bank in Northern Ireland in 2012 in a landmark judgment I got against them when they wrongfully invested my money into an incorrect fund and chose not to tell me. So I mean, my father and me are actually in landmark judgments in the Irish Free State and in landmark judgment in Northern Ireland. So I mean, my experience all stems from being wrongfully accused, but on that long road of 30 years, I have educated myself in basically every aspect of criminal law and civil litigation law. So I mean that has helped me greatly being able to deal with issues in local government.
Yeah, it's
I
like
mean,
what's the song say? I fought the
you
law.
asked me about the Labour Party, and what a lot of people doesn't understand about the Labour Party. One of the real main reasons that I left the Labour Party was that the legal representatives of the Labour Party in 2010 advised me that it was impossible to take a judicial review against the Irish government to force them to hold the by-election in Donegal for the vacant seat that was in Donegal. But the legal advisors, one of the legal advisors to the Labour Party, told me personally, I was prepared to put up 50,000 to take that case. Told me personally, face to face and on the telephone, that I wouldn't won that case. But that same legal advisor ended up as the lead senior counsel for Pierce Doherty and Sinn Féin in that challenge that Sinn Féin and Pierce Doherty took against the Irish government. So, I mean, what does that tell you about Irish politics? And that same barrister today is a very and I have a huge amount of respect for this barrister, now a High Court judge, and he is one of the smartest constitutional lawyers in the country. But I had major rows with the Labour Party behind the scenes about how that happened. It shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. So it shows you how close the political establishments are in Ireland. And I see Sinn Féin as they're actually more Fianna Fáil now than Fianna Fáil themselves. I think we've got the worst opposition in Europe. The accountability is not in Irish politics.
Well, Councillor Frank McBearty, we've been chatting for nearly an hour. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I can certainly see. I know you started out in party politics, and now you're independent. It'd be very difficult for you to go back into party politics, because
Well,
the
yeah,
way
yeah.
the way represent people, you could only be an independent.
Well, see, the thing about it is, you're on an educational process in life, and my political career has been an education process. I've had to learn the hard way. I was in the Labour Party for 4 years. I then was going to retire before the 2019 local elections, and I was approached by Fine Gael, basically begged me to run for them in the 2019 local elections. And I ended up being their third candidate in my constituency, where they almost got 3 councillors elected, but only lasted 5 weeks because of a certain thing that was done to me by another councillor, which I can't talk about here because of litigation. But the bottom line is, I've never was suited to party politics because I'd never draw the line. I'd never. If I think there's something wrong and it needs to be exposed, then I will expose it, no matter what about party whips or anything else. And I'm my own man. I've always been my own man. And one thing I don't like is people telling me that I can't do something when I can do it. And that is what party politics is about. You come in and you be a nice wee boy or a nice wee girl, and you sit over in that corner and you do what the hierarchy in that party tells you what to do. Or you won't be getting no committees, and you won't be getting no expenses, or you won't be getting your wee trip here and there. I didn't go into politics for that. And I was very naive when I first went into politics. I thought I could change the world once I got elected to Donegal County Council. After my first 5 years in local government, I realized very quickly after those first 5 years that I was never going to change Irish politics. I've tried, but what do you call it? It's impossible to change Irish politics, which Irish politics needs change. But the only people who can actually change Irish politics is the voters themselves.
Yeah, well, you're certainly making an impact. So, Councillor Frank,
the thing about it is, you're judged on your work. And my re-election at every local election has judged me that I have worked for people who have come to me for help. I haven't been able to help everybody, but the vast majority of people that do come to me, I help them. Even if I can't help them, I will try and help them. And that's what politics should be about.
Yeah, so it should be about. We definitely be in agreement that here and there is political roundup. Politics is about people and trying grassroots and helping people get what they need today. But Councillor Frank McBearty was absolutely fascinating chatting to you, and I'm sure there's so much that we've covered, and there's so much more that we'd love to cover, and we definitely have you on again to talk more about the defective.
People should click onto my Facebook page and click on the link that's on my Facebook page for the position paper that I've written about the defective concrete scandal. You see, I'm encouraging people who are going to view this. I'm encouraging them to stop calling this the MICA scandal. You need to call it the correct name, and the correct name for this scandal in Donegal is the defective concrete scandal, because that is the problem. The problem is defective concrete. Whether it's a defective concrete block or a defective ready-mix concrete foundation, it's defective concrete as the cause of the structural defects in Donegal properties. And only a public inquiry, an independent statutory public inquiry, that is the only way we will get the full truth of the systemic corruption that has caused this scandal in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, Councillor Frank McBearty, thanks for taking the time to talk to us here on the Irish Political Roundup. And I'd like to say thank you to our viewers for taking the time to watch this video. And I'd also say a big thank you to my colleague Roisin Cllr, who unfortunately wasn't able to make it this evening, but I'd like to say thank her as well for all her fantastic work that she does here on the Irish Political Roundup. So from me, Paul Brophy, we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Paul.